determined that you were trying to avoid going over that $10,000 limit. And of course, if you've got a business, if you're anyone who's ever had a business, you understand if you're dealing in cash, that's not a lot of money. That is a lot of money for us as individuals. It's not a lot of money for a business to do that. Now, this is what the attorney, the federal attorney, U.S. Attorney Steve West said to McClellan. He said, don't go public. He said, this will only make things worse for you. He said, it just ratchets up feelings within the agency. Get that? In other words, don't make us mad at you. Don't go public because we'll get mad at you. So he says, here's the deal. I'll return 50% of the money, and we'll stop this right now. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He went public, and the public was outraged about that. They've now returned that money, that $107,000 to him, which basically would put him out of business. That was his entire bank account that he had for his business. Then we find a few days later, the same U.S. attorney, Steve West in North Carolina, going after another small business. This is a small business out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Tom Bednar and his wife. They said they had a bank account for their 3-decade-old business, 30 years old, Marla Enterprises. They were amazed to find that the bank account was empty. The bank called them and wanted to know how they were going to cover $18,000 in outstanding checks that they had written. So you have to understand the cash flow involved in a business, the amount of money is much larger than you're going to see as an individual. That's why $115,000 is not that much. They just wrote $18,000 worth of checks. Now, in this case, it wasn't the IRS, it was the Secret Service that seized the money, but it was done by the same U.S. attorney. He said, we got no warning, nothing at all. And so this guy did the same thing to them. Again, he said, I'll give you back half of it. And they said, no, we don't owe anything. We didn't commit a crime. We didn't do anything. And he said, okay, I'll give you all of it back except for $10,000. And they said, absolutely not. This is what he had to say. This is what the business owner had to say. He said, my wife and I have run a business our entire lives. It's hard-earned, legitimate money. Why should I give it up and let it be stolen from us, whether it's $1 or $100? Exactly right. He committed no crime. This is a criminal government, and this is the kind of government that Dennis Hastert created. Right. That is still with us, that is still abusing everybody. And then get this, even though they have had some minor reforms of this, they had the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act that was just recently passed. Under that, these people who have had charges made against them by their banks, they've had legal fees that they've had to go through to try to get their money back that was stolen from them by the U.S. government. These people are entitled to get back $25,000 in legal fees. The government just said, we're not going to do that. I mean, this is the law. This is a law that was passed, Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act, that was passed to stop these very kind of abuses from attorneys that work for the U.S. government, like Stephen West in North Carolina. And he just simply says, no, we're not going to obey that law. They pick which laws they want to obey, which ones they don't. They violate the Constitution with all of them, and they're stealing people's money right out of their accounts. It's absolutely
and who they
amazing.
want to come after and prosecute, because obviously the banks are too big to jail. They won't come after them when they're...
Well, and let's understand exactly. That's exactly the point. Look at the largest money laundering case ever, HSBC. They were fined $1.9 billion. Again, that sounds like a lot of money, but not for HSBC. Do you understand how much that fine is? And let me make it clear. HSBC really was engaged in criminal activity. They've come to us and they've said, we need to have this surveillance of your accounts. We need to have this massive system of reporting from the banks spying on you and sending reports to us all the time. We need to have that because this might be you might be doing something, moving cash around to launder money for drug cartels or for terrorist groups. HSBC was laundering money for drug cartels, for terrorist groups. There's no question about it. They got caught red-handed. They're the kind of person or kind of entity that this law was written for, trying to stop this. Not for people who are hardworking small businessmen who just happen to be depositing money without any regard, not trying to break the law, not understanding even what the law is, and yet the government takes their entire account. They took $1.9 billion from HSBC. That was less than 1 month's profit for that company. Right. Less than 1 month's profit. If you look at that on an annual basis, that's 8%. If you look at that as a tax for them doing business illegally with drug cartels and money launderers, okay, that 8% tax, if you want to call it that, the money laundering tax, that's less than their income tax. Of course, they don't pay any income tax anyway, but as less than a corporation would pay, less than an individual would pay. None of you out there are paying 8% income tax. And so they get away with an 8% tax, even though they were guilty as could be with this.
Right. And that's the other thing, is just not pointing out that the real crime should be here with Hastert. He entered in Congress with a net worth of no more than $270,000 and then exited Congress with somewhere between $4 million and $17 million.
Same thing with the Clintons.
That's a crime.
Exactly. Same thing with the Clintons. Same thing with the Obamas. Okay. Of course, Hillary says when she got out of Congress, they were flat broke.
Oh, yeah.
But so
that's why they had to up their speaking fees.
Yeah. That's the real problem. And I don't think you can stop it. See, campaign finance reform isn't going to get there. This is something that these guys are getting after they get elected. The problem is not campaign finance reform, unfortunately. The problem is that there's so much power in Washington that it is a black hole for criminals. Okay, it's a black hole for these type of people like Dennis Hastert, who they know doesn't have much sense. I mean, this is a guy that the FBI's come to him and ask him why he took out $750,000 and $50,000 increments, and he lies about it. And then he starts trying to structure his deposits, and he should know better because he passed the law.
Exactly.
Okay, if he doesn't know what's in the law, maybe he didn't read it after he passed it.
Right.
You know, he didn't do what Pelosi did, right?
Pass it to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, but of all people, he should know what's in it. So he's not a very bright bulb. Okay, but he's somebody who's crooked, he's corrupt, somebody that they can control. Okay, so
and he's obviously been a sociopath and a predator, you know, from his early days as a coach.
Yes.
So
there's a lot we can learn from this, but I hope people will understand the legal corruption, the fallacies underlying civil asset forfeiture and structuring as a crime. Now, Rand Paul and other individuals have co-sponsored this. I can't remember the co-sponsor in the House. They have sponsored now twice what they call the FAIR Act. The FAIR Act would stop civil asset forfeiture, and it would stop the crime, quote unquote, of structuring if it's not being used to hide something that is illegal activity like HSBC. So hopefully that will go through. People need to understand what this is. And let me give you something from Woody Guthrie. This is the guy who wrote This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is Mine. He said, as through this world I've wandered, I've seen lots of funny men. Some will rob you with a 6-gun, some with a fountain pen. Okay? Dennis Hastert is that kind of man. This attorney, Stephen West, this U.S. attorney who is robbing small businesses throughout central North Carolina, is that kind of man. He is nothing but a thief with a fountain pen, and he's not obeying the law. He won't even obey the reform of this unconstitutional act.
Well, and all I could say is hopefully that with this happening right there in Congress as they're trying to figure out if they're going to reauthorize the Patriot Act or not, everyone there can sort of see that they're not above the law, or that they might,
Hey guys, this is Rob Dew. I just wanted to give y'all a quick update on what's going on. We just got contact from Joe Biggs. He's acquired his rental car and is on his way to the site. So I would say 30, 35 minutes he'll be there, depending on traffic, what it's like. We're about 2 hours ahead here in Texas, so it's about 8 o'clock now. So it's, 6 o'clock there. And so just to give everybody an update out who's watching us online on the YouTube stream and on the Infowars.com/show stream and on prisonplanet.tv, all the streams out there. We appreciate everybody watching. Joe Biggs is on his way. We're going to, as soon as he gets there, we'll get a rundown from him of what he sees, what's going on. And I do believe he's going to be open carrying his head down Provectus rifle. So
good. We'll be able to see it. Hopefully not in action.
The Second Amendment there. So
yeah,
just give you that quick update. David, great breakdown there on the real hidden truth of this Dennis Hastert thing. It's got a lot of angles to it, but I think you've really nailed it.
Well, Rob, I hope that with this, they're still talking about the Patriot Act, as Leanne mentioned, and I hope that people will keep this in mind. People don't understand what's going on. We just saw that with a report from Rex Jones. They don't know what the TPP is. If you asked any of these people what structuring is, they wouldn't know. Businesses don't know. They don't understand how the government is robbing us, and that's really a big part of the problem.
Well, and they think they're above the problem that they're creating for the
they think it's not going to happen to them. But look, no matter, you don't have to have a business. People are getting their cash stolen from them as they're traveling in cars, traveling on trains across this country. Whatever you're carrying, whatever the amount is, it's a big amount to you.
Right.
And actually, people who don't have a lot of money are really in a worse position than someone who has a business that they can use for collateral, because they can hire lawyers to get this back. You don't get a public defender to help you recover your cash when they seize it with civil asset forfeiture, because they say it's not a criminal act, so you don't get a public defender even. So if it's a small amount of money and you're poor, even if you want to do this on the point of principle, you're not going to be able to do it because you're not going to have the money to challenge these people in court.
And also, too, there with the veiled threats that the police are issuing to people that they're confiscating their money. You were mentioning that they were kind of also sending out those same threats to the bankers themselves.
Absolutely. They are going after individuals. They're going after small businesses. They let the big criminals, the big banks like HSBC, who are actually doing criminal money laundering, they let them go with very small penalty. But they're threatening the small banks, just like everything else. So small banks are going to come after them. And so there was this conference of anti-money laundering individuals, anti-money laundering and financial crime conference. And this was back in March. And this was the Assistant Attorney General, Caldwell, who went and addressed them. And what he did was he used this occasion to threaten the small banks. And he says that he also talks about a process where they are going after Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative, CARRY. I guess it's kind of like cash and carry, where they go after a foreign government. They say, well, we determined that this foreign government we think is corrupt, so we're going to call it a kleptocracy. And we're going to say that wherever we can get to any of their assets, we're going to just steal them. Okay. Now, of course, they're not going to give it back to the people. They're going to keep it. The U.S. government is going to keep it. They're going to keep it just like law enforcement keeps the stuff that they steal. But that's the whole point. The irony of this is that our government is the biggest kleptocracy on the planet. It is a rule by thieves. That's what these people are doing throughout this. But I want to read to you what he said to these bankers. He said, when the criminal division, that's what he represents, and these are the people that will be trying Dennis Hastert. He said, when the criminal division evaluates a company's compliance policy during an investigation, we don't only look at how the policy reads on paper. We also look at messages that are conveyed to employees, including in-person meetings, emails, telephone calls, compensation. In other words, this is a full-on East German surveillance state, okay, where they're going to look at everything about your business. They're going to complete surveillance of everything. It's not going to be like the privileged people like Hillary Clinton who say they've got a private email server and you can't see that. No, they're going to come in and look at everything in these banks. They say we look at it as a whole. A company that's meaningfully stressed compliance, have they? Or if they're faced in a conflict between compliance and profits, does the company choose profits? In the anti-money laundering and sanctions context, in particular, effective compliance requires more. And I'd like to highlight a few points. First, you need to know your customer. In other words, spy incessantly on your customer. Constantly report everything about your customer. And he says, it's not enough just to be filing these reports. We want you to do more reports, and we want you to contact law enforcement completely. They say part of this is information sharing. Okay. And he says the second thing is, if this is a foreign bank and they have a U.S. branch, then this foreign bank that happens to have a branch somewhere in the United States, they need to spy on all of their customers in that other country. So if they've got if it's an Irish bank, they want them to spy on all the Irish customers. I know this is an international show. We got a lot of people who watch us from around the world. Here's the point, folks. If you don't live in the United States, make sure you don't do business with a bank that has a branch in the United States, because if you do, the federal government wants that Irish bank, even if you never set foot in the U.S., they want that Irish bank to report everything about you, anything that is suspicious. And then if some federal agency wants to assume that you did something suspicious, they will confiscate your cash, even though you never set foot in the United States. That's the kind of kleptocracy we have. You want a real kleptocracy? It's right here in Washington.
Wow.
And he says the majority of financial institutions file suspicious activity reports, but we encourage those institutions to consider whether to take more action, specifically alert law enforcement authorities about the problem. They may be able to seize funds or initiate an investigation or take other proactive steps. And he goes on to say, you might think this is going to cost you a lot of money to hire all these anti-money laundering personnel. But he said, it may not be a profit center, but an investment will pay off, because if